So I just watched this film called Entheogenesis about shamanism, the disenchantment of the modern world, and psychedelics as one among many of the possible uh, ways of returning to a more enchanted, shamanistic, and ecstatic participation of human beings and nature. Um, and I've been trying the last few days to make a video about the relationship of consciousness and the body, or our awareness and our physical embodiment. And I've been struggling to know where to begin. And watching this film um, gave me a little bit of direction. And in it, David Delancey, who's a professor at my school, said that the Platonic conception of the soul as this element, this divine element which exists, or at least can exist independently of the body, was an inheritance of, or an influence, which was a result of the Greek cultures coming into contact with more shamanic cultures, where in many cases um, plant teachers and different concoctions were brewed which allowed shamans to enter into states of trance where certain uh, information of symbolic importance was brought back from another world into the world of, the dominant culture. And the shamans filled this very important role of sort of the intermediary between the spirit world and the human world. And the Greeks took this concept of this shamanistic skill and sort of generalized it in a way, took it out of its natural context, such that it became our modern understanding of the soul or the psyche as that irreducible element of the human being. But the Greek conception of it, again, removed it from nature and said that, unlike the traditional shamanistic understanding of it as permeating all of nature, not just inside the skull, this new Greek understanding was that it was a purely human, and even, in Plato and Aristotle, and for most of the history of Western philosophy, you'll see this tendency to say that it is men who have a soul, a rational soul, and not so much that women don't have it, but that somehow the female soul is more affected by the body. So there's this bias in Western philosophy to elevate the transcendental rationality of the mind, its ability to see the underlying forms which exist independently of the phenomenal sensory world. Um, and so this dualism arises between mind and body, or spirit and matter. Um, and Descartes is not the first to recognize, or the first to express this dualism, um, but he certainly laid out the territory which allowed industrial civilization and scientific technology and so forth to emerge, by saying that nature is just a machine that the human being can exploit and use for its own purposes. Um, and this is the move of disenchantment. And I think there's obviously an element of truth to this idea that the psychic or spiritual realm exists, um, if not independently of the physical world, then at least it doesn't require the physical world in order to exist. Um, but I think when we abstract a bit too much, we separate so fully the spiritual from the material that we end up um, destroying the material world in which we live. And I think this dualism, this separation of consciousness from the body, is to a large extent the reason that our civilization has gone about devastating its ecological context, and also ignoring the importance of human relationship, instead replacing that type of a value in relationship with the value of commodities and products to be owned by individuals. Um, so there's something very important about uh, returning to an experience of the natural world which is embodied, an experience of other people which is fully participatory, and isn't this doesn't project this kind of solipsistic distance between one mind and another that isolates us, um, because it's that feeling of alienation and loneliness that drives people to consume products and buy um, certain brands because of the image it's supposed to reflect, about their personality to other individuals, and this very competitive sense of the world as a collection of competing uh, entities, which um, can only become uh, more powerful by stepping on each other, is, for obvious reasons, ineffectual, and it's unfulfilling. And I think we have a model in the past, which, if you watch this film Entheogenesis, you'll see, and learn some of the history of shamanism. But we have a history to draw from, and I think the idea that we civilized, apparently civilized people, have outgrown anything which may have taken place thousands of years before us, that kind of hubris is not going to help us turn this sinking ship around, and, the sinking ship being our global um, economic and political systems. Um, the old way of being human, which, the old way meaning the modern way, needs to be outgrown, and we do so not by just returning to the ancient world and re-submerging ourselves in nature, but by paying attention once more to the great deal of wisdom which was established at the very origin of the human species, instead of thinking we can start from scratch with some technological invention which would allow us to control it all from the outside. That is the pipe dream which has led us into almost complete ecological destruction and socio-political collapse. So what do we do? Well, start by watching this film, Entheogenesis, and I think what we do is continue to express ourselves and have faith in the goodness of the process and the purpose of the process, which, while it may take us into some dark nights, does so only so that the next morning will be that much more shockingly beautiful. So watch the film, let me know your thoughts on what I had to say here, and let's continue the conversation.